After a brief flirtation with hockey and studying towards an engineering degree, our next guest changed direction and chose one of the most demanding careers, a classical pianist. He has traveled the world playing in the most prestigious concert halls, creating one of the most comprehensive sets of recordings, sharing his love of classical music, and giving great pleasure to so many. Now in his 80th year, he continues to wow audiences. Please welcome a treasure of Vancouver, Robert Silverman.
I'd like to start by telling you a little bit of a story. When I was a young man, and I was invited, I grew up in Montreal, and I was invited to a salon. Not quite like this, but a small one. Except I didn't realize that I was the guest of honor. And at one point, the host said, "Robert, would you like to sit down and play for us?" This came as a complete surprise, but I did have a piece or two in my fingers, and I did play. And since then, I've learned how to say no a little better, but did you invite me, or I'll have my agent send you my bill. In any case, I performed, and then the host, as I was leaving, he said, "You know, I really liked what you're playing." He said, "But frankly, I'm more of I like semi-popular music, semi-classical music more." So I said, "Oh, really? What sort of things?" And he said, "Well, you know, this French guy, you know, he writes a lot of semi-classical stuff, very..." So I was trying to be helpful. I said, "Michel Legrand?" No, somebody else, maybe older." So I said, "Oh, did you mean Chopin?" Yeah, that's the one. And I don't know how I had the temerity to say, first of all, he wasn't French, he was Polish. And secondly, I just played something by him. So, but, you know, we've come a long way. There was a time when Chopin wasn't taken seriously as a completely kosher classical composer, you might say. He didn't write these long symphonies, he didn't write grand opera, he just basically wrote for piano. And a lot of people didn't know quite what to make of this guy. He certainly wrote very attractive music. He could make a piano sound like nobody else in terms of its sonorities, but there was something just not quite right. He didn't know enough about structure of music or how to create a long piece of music. Anyway, we know better now. There's been a lot of study, both by performers and by scholars, and he's taken his place by now as one of the great composers of all time. I played a lot of him when I was younger, and then I got bitten by the more serious composers, Beethoven, Brahms, Mozart, all of which I recorded a lot of. But it was only really about 5 years ago that I returned as part of a recording project I was asked to do, to return to Chopin. And my goodness, I don't know how I had the temerity to play him when I was younger. I learned so much more. He is not just good, he is great. And furthermore, he is totally original. He had very few people who ever could copy his way of composing. And I've been on a Chopin kick ever since, and it's produced 2 recordings, and I'll just one or two more sentence. He did not have, he had no real formal training. He grew up in a small town outside Warsaw. He had they had some good musicians there. He studied piano, he studied composition, and these guys knew that he was just good enough that they didn't have to teach him anything, they could just guide him. And he was a fully fledged composer and one of the greatest pianists in the world by the time he was 16 or 17. And he was writing his Chopin, his etudes, a lot of them were written during his teens. He's really wonderful. I'm going to play, in Chopin terms, a fairly substantial work, his 3rd scherzo number in C sharp minor.